What is up, guys? John Claymore here, Gear Issue 33, and today we're going to be doing another one of those little reviews, and of course we're going to be asking the question, could the U.S. defend from an invasion of the homeland, or I like to call this how we would do this, because this is infographics, and oftentimes they do miss little details. But that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into this one.
Soviet and Cuban paratroopers begin to fall from the sky. In minutes, thousands of communist invaders have gained a foothold in the very heart of America. With World War III in full swing, it's up to a band of plucky teenagers to fight a guerrilla war against the godless commies. If you grew up in the 80s or just plain don't have bad taste in movies, then you're well aware of the action hit Red Dawn, a film that portrays a Soviet invasion of the United States toward the end of the Cold War. No, we're not talking about the remake. We don't speak of the remake.
Thank God.
But film aside, could it really happen? That question was asked by infographics show fan Blazik, who wanted to know if someone were to invade America, could the U.S. pull all its forces home and hold out against a foreign invader? Despite what fiction like Red Dawn would have you believe, the United States was never in any danger of an invasion by the Soviet Union, mostly because the Russian people were about as interested in invading the U.S. as Americans were in invading the Soviet Union.
Really quick, guys, this right here was somewhat true, but we're probably going to dive into that when we do an actual Red Dawn movie review. There's been a couple of them out there. Probably the best one is Bob Eggers. But there's been a couple more that's came out that were actually pretty good. But for God's sakes, leave Renegade Cut alone. That guy there is just an absolute nut and absolute loon, as most SJWs and leftists are. But we'll probably be discussing that one in a military movie review somewhere in the future. So make sure you guys stick around for that one. I know the interruptions are going to come from time to time, but I'll pretty much give you guys a bit of a cue. I'll try to give you guys a certain look to let you guys know when one's coming up. Also, something else, to make sure you guys critique me in the comment section of the video. I really and truly would like the feedback.
That didn't stop politicians and military officials on both sides using the fear of an evil capitalist or communist invasion from ballooning defense budgets. The saddest fact of the Cold War just might be that despite all the preparations to defend from an invasion by both sides, neither NATO nor the Soviet bloc ever had a single war plan drawn up for an actual preemptive invasion of the other's territory. But another major reason why the U.S. was never under any threat of an invasion is due to its unique place in the world geography. In order for an enemy to get to America, first it must cross two massive oceans, and this...
Actually, let's take a look at the actual distance really quick. Sorry, I didn't meant to give you guys a cue. If anything, I would argue that possibly coming over the eastern section of Russia into Alaska, but with that right there to occur, you would have to get absolute total coordination from Canada, which, by the way, I'm not so sure is I wouldn't say at the rate of their leadership that's not entirely out of the realm of possibility. However, it is unlikely. Coming over from Europe, however, would probably be the worst. However, if you were able to put cells or people inside the northern section of South America, which, by the way, would be hilarious. I also find it funny because right now we got this border crisis, and I wonder how many of those people are actually friendly to the United States. I have a bad feeling that they're not. We'll probably do more videos on that in the future. As a matter of fact, I kind of sort of covered that in a previous review in the Red Dawn scenario. I'll be leaving that video in the description box or the comment section one for you guys to check out. But let's go ahead and keep this rolling.
America, first it must cross two massive oceans, and this geographic fact makes the United States the single most secure nation on Earth. Even today, moving troops and equipment across the oceans is a massive undertaking in terms of both logistics and cost, and very few nations are even capable of attempting the feat. But let's say that the two leading peer competitors to the U.S. decided to join forces and team up against the United States. With all troops returned home from overseas, could the U.S. defend itself against a double-sided assault against it by China and Russia? First, the two-power alliance would have to decide on where to strike. For an invasion to be successful, both nations would have to land troops as quickly as possible, and that would require the use of a working seaport. These ports would require good rail and road infrastructure, and must have deep water anchorages so that large cargo ships could dock and disgorge troops and heavy equipment. The need to take and hold major seaports is critical, as aside from a few token forces with a small number of fire support platforms, amphibious landings alone wouldn't be able to deliver firepower fast enough to secure a beachhead. In Normandy during World War II, the success of the landings was largely down to a brilliant deception played out by the Allies, which saw the Nazis concentrate their forces at the wrong landing site. And even when the real landings happened 100 miles away, Nazi commanders were so fooled by Allied intelligence that they ordered their forces to hold their positions, believing that the real assault was coming their way any day. The ruse, combined with some whopping tactical blunders by Hitler, allowed the Allies to quickly build a makeshift port facility which let Allied armor and artillery disembark. Had Hitler allowed his commanders to commit panzer reinforcements to the landings, Normandy would have likely ended as a complete catastrophe for the Allies. By the time he cleared reserve panzer units for the assault on the beachheads, Allied logistical units had already disembarked enough tanks to repel the assault. In an invasion of the U.S. homeland, such a ruse would be impossible to pull off. Long-range and satellite surveillance assets.
All right, really quick. The long-range and satellite surveillance assets would obviously see an invasion coming. However, there is a scenario where I think it could possibly be done. They would have to have complete total compliance between Mexico, South America, and possibly Canada for China or Russia or possibly even NATO. By the way, I've done a couple of videos on the possibility of was. Let's just say people were kind of, let's just say they were kind of fear-mongering at that time back in 2015. We'll probably be doing more videos in the future, especially when it comes to military scenarios. But the thing is this right here. You'd have to have full total compliance from our neighbor to the north and to our neighbor to the south. Also something else too, you'd probably have to go through with the Compton effect. Now, so you guys, very briefly, and I may even do a video at a later date on the Compton effect itself. Basically what it is that you fire a nuclear missile over the U.S. mainland and you detonate it in the air. And it'll send out an EMP, which will actually it'll practically render all electronic activities, anything that's electrical based, you basically render it useless. However, there's also been a lot of reports that state that the Compton effect is not as bad as one would think. But don't worry, we'll be diving into that right there in later videos. That scenario is probably the only one, or possibly if a civil war in the country was to erupt. And of course, we'll be doing videos. As a matter of fact, they're next in line, the reaction to Civil War stuff. Maybe if a civil war was occurring in the United States, maybe a humanitarian crisis, and some of our enemies might use that against us. However, this also makes me kind of wonder with all the one-way ticket flights out of Russia being basically being filled. It makes me wonder how many people are Putin sending over here. Okay, a lot of people think it's people that are just leaving Russia. I'm not entirely sure. It could be people that Putin is sending. He did say a while back that he expected us to go into civil war, but who knows? Like I said, we'll be exploring those topics in the future. That's the only scenario where I think an invasion of the U.S. homeland could occur. However, and I know guys are going crazy in the comment section as they come across this video at this point in time. However, I think it would be suicidal, not just the fact that you have gun owners, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll discuss how many of those would actually fight. But it's almost logistically impossible to feed said armies, especially when you're coming into a country like the United States with so many passes. It's an extremely difficult country to invade.
Would see an invasion fleet days before it made landfall, and its target would be clearly known to the American defenders. Therefore, China and Russia would have to act quickly and decisively, taking major seaports and holding them long enough to disembark a sizable expeditionary force able to repel American counterassaults. For China, the only good options for unloading main battle tanks and mechanized artillery would be the ports in LA, Long Beach, Oakland, Tacoma, and Seattle.
Okay, really quick. All those areas, very, very blue, very liberal. Those people would not help our troops out because the libs obviously hate America. So they would probably take advantage of that. However, I could not see them getting beyond, if they were to try, I could not see them getting beyond the mountains, okay? Like I said, this country is full of mountains. I mean, bro, look, I'll go ahead in a minute. I was in New York State 2 weeks ago, and I did not realize how mountainous New York State was. First time ever going outside the city. And this right here is not just like upstate New York. This is like New York State, I'd say like an hour away from the city. Orange County, going up to Saratoga. Not as far upstate as you think. It's a pretty mountainous area. It's like that all through the East Coast, but it's also like that on the West Coast as well. I do think, however, they would not see a lot of resistance in some of these cities, except from our own troops, and we'd have to retreat. But once you get back to the mountains, the fight pretty much becomes impossible to win for the enemy invader.
LA Long Beach complex would be especially attractive as it's one of the world's largest ports and would allow Chinese forces to disembark very quickly. Unfortunately, these port facilities are also very close to several American air and naval bases, making them easily defended. The Seattle and Tacoma ports, however, are far more vulnerable, as only 5 major American bases are near these facilities.
Seattle, most communistic area. Tacoma, Washington State, most communistic area. What I could see, however, is I could see if they launched an extremely massive armada. By the way, those ships would have to be stealth ships, and they'd have to do it by tanker, meaning they'd have to do it with basically commercial ships bringing people in, and they have to have some help from the south to do so, of course, meaning Mexico, which, like I said before, is a possibility because of this invasion. I think that's actually what's going on with the border. I think they're trying to set us up for it, or it's a possibility. Like I said, I know it sounds crazy, But the thing is right here, if they got some friendly help in those areas, they could possibly get beyond the coast. And like I said before, I don't think they would get beyond the mountains. I think they would actually be stopped butt cold. But there are other possibilities, other avenues they may go. Like I said, an invasion of the United States is absolutely doomed, okay? And I can even tell you exactly how it would go. We're not going to do it in this video here, but as you guys are probably picking up on right now, yeah, this is a very, very tall order, even if you get beyond these cities, which I don't think there's going to be a lot of resistance in, because let's face it, they're all communistic, and they're all people who hate the United States anyways who live in those areas, but I don't think they get beyond the mountains or the rural areas.
In Washington, though, would mean Chinese forces would have to fight south and into California through easily defended and very mountainous terrain, a tactical nightmare for any Chinese commander. Russian invaders would face an even less enviable job. The American East Coast is home to far more numerous large port facilities, giving the Russian invasion force a greater number of targets to pick from. Unfortunately, the American East Coast is also the most heavily defended, with several dozen major military installations spread out from north to south. The East Coast is also home to America's largest military shipyards, which would be so heavily protected it would be suicidal to attempt a landing or assault against them. Russia's best bet would be to attempt a landing in Mobile, Alabama, or Houston, Texas.
Oh, God, yeah. I don't see you getting through Texas. I don't see you getting through Alabama. That's the southeast United States. We're all ravenous, gun-toting rednecks who were looking to kill an invader. Maybe New York, very, very blue. If you're assuming that you got beyond, you were able to get beyond that. Say if you were able to shut the powers in the city, you might be able to get in those areas. But once again, as I mentioned before, the East Coast of the United States is extremely hard to manipulate. From New York State all the way down through Western Maryland, Northern Virginia, and even into Central North Carolina, it's an extremely hard. I'd go even further. I'd say northwestern Georgia. There's a lot of mountains, a lot of hills, and not to mention the weather patterns in this country change like crazy. But if you think you're big and bad and you think you're good enough to go through Texas, good look. Matter of fact, I think Texas would be the first target they would go through. They would do it through the southern border, and they would do it here. They try to overwhelm, but they would actually get stopped. They get halted pretty quick. Native Texians, New Mexico, people from southern Colorado, and of course Oklahoma would probably stall that invader by a great deal. But good luck. Go ahead and try it.
This, however, would mean Russian forces would have to spend more time out at sea and move into the Gulf.
I got to bring that up. Historical moment. Okay, it was during the Russo-Japanese War that they sent basically an entire armada all the way from the Baltic Sea all the way across to Japan. And of course, halfway through the trip, they had mutinies and all kinds of crap. And eventually, that fleet would pretty much be destroyed before it even got to the area that it was going to. I'll leave a link in the description box, but. Yeah, also something else too, like I said before, even the areas around Washington, D.C., you're dealing with old Confederate battlefields, a lot of tradition in the South. Yeah, I think that invading the United States, especially on the East Coast, especially for the Russians, would be, I think it would be a wet dream for a lot of people here in the United States. I'm pretty sure we would actually enjoy the fight.
Mexico, where they would be surrounded on all sides but the south by major American air bases. For both our challengers, the tactical picture is not looking very good, as the United States simply has no viable landing sites for a major expeditionary
Air Force in the
that
world
couldn't
too.
be easily defended.
Largest doctrine.
China and Russia could opt to coerce or bribe Mexico or Canada into allowing them to land at their facilities and launch an invasion into the U.S. itself. This would be by far the best strategic option for the invasion forces, but in response to the agreement between either nation in the Sino-Russian alliance, the United States would immediately begin a large-scale bombing campaign against port facilities in Canada or Mexico. With
Really quick note, like I said, we have a guy in Trudeau up north who's not friendly to the United States, and also something else too. There were several doctrines that were drawn up between Adolf Hitler and Mexico. There was one such one where Hitler had offered to try to invade the United States through Mexico. That's another video, believe it or not, on infographics that we will be discovering at a later date. However, though, just because they're not, and by the way, Mexico is, for the most part, they've gotten away with crapping their worst on us. It wasn't until President Trump got in office that someone called it out. And now that he is gone, they feel a little bit more emboldened, not to mention South America and the border crisis. Let's just say you get a bunch of people who may not be, South American. What if they're actually Islamic? What if they're Islamic terrorists? What if you have a bunch of, let's just say, bombings here in the country at one point in time? What if that right there occurs? Next thing you know, you got a massive amount of civil chaos and possibly a civil war. You've got BLM, Antifa, and all these left-wing groups may cause some problems. in the cities. And next thing you know, you've got a civil war. And of course, this would be a time for other countries to say, look at the United States, they're violating human rights. Because after a few weeks, people would begin to fight back. And next thing you know, you've got brown and black people getting killed left and right, and poor white liberals who thought they could take on good old-fashioned rednecks. Next thing you know, this right here becomes a possibility.
Every viable port being within easy reach of American bombers. Even before the invasion force crossed the ocean, they would be sailing for ports that have been turned into rubble. Assuming that the U.S. didn't use naval aviation, which it definitely would, the invaders could opt for using ports in South America, well out of reach of most American bombers, and then simply move north to invade through Mexico. Moving through South America's poor rail and road infrastructure.
Got to get through Texas, I'm telling you. And also something else too, people forget, the southwestern portion of the United States, a lot of hills, deserts, different type of heat.
Structure, though, would be a nightmare for the invaders, allowing plenty of time for the U.S. to simply move blocking forces through Mexico to Panama and then hold off the invasion there. If, miraculously, though the alliance did manage to land forces in Canada or Mexico, it would face a different tactical nightmare altogether. In Canada, the lack of suitable border crossings would force the invaders to spread out over a large area, or bottleneck and be subjected to endless attacks by American air power. In Mexico, military border crossings would be possible over a far larger area, but enemy forces would be moving through terrain that provided absolutely no cover. American air power would once more devastate any invaders trying to move through the flat terrain of the U.S.-Mexico border. Geography alone provides the United States with near invulnerability from enemy invasion, but the logistics of the world's militaries proves why the U.S. simply cannot be invaded. An invasion of the American homeland would rely on naval power to get the job done. And right off the bat, no nation on Earth, nor any combination of nations, has the firepower and logistical support needed to carry out such an invasion. The matter is one of historical necessity for the world. Ever since the end of the Second World War, all of the world's major powers have had no need to project military power far from their own shores, except for the United States. The Soviet Union was chiefly concerned with securing its European borders, and in the case of a Third World War, its most vital strategic objectives could all be reached over land. The vitally important oil...
By the way, guys, there's one of the main reasons why the other day when I did my video about Russia, I was talking about the fact that Putin has got an opportunity to build his military, and at the same time, don't worry, we'll be revisiting that at a later date. He may have an opportunity to go into areas like Kazakhstan and Central Asia if he can get those people in alliance with him. And if he can get a hold of Europe, which, by the way, he's trying to do through agreements with oil by cutting off the tap during the Ukrainian crisis, it's a possibility. Like I said, this is very unlikely, but at the same time, I think we're looking at a scenario here in the future where this could become a possibility, especially if we have hostile leadership to the north and hostile leadership to the south. Not to mention the fact we have hostile leadership right here in our own country. So while it's unlikely, I think we need to always keep it in the back of our minds. Yeah, guys, go ahead and call me crazy. I don't really care. It's okay.
Fields of the Middle East could all be taken via land routes through Afghanistan and Iran, and no navy was needed to hold off NATO forces in Europe. The same was true for Europe's NATO members. While once their mighty navies ruled the waves all over the world, their concerns in the 20th century quickly became resisting a possible Soviet invasion, and for that, no major naval power was needed. In the Atlantic, the Soviets hoped to slow the American response with the use of submarines, but ultimately knew that they could never stop the U.S. Navy, and thus never seriously tried. On the other side of the world, China struggles to turn itself into a first world power. And other than resentment towards Japan over its actions in World War II, China has had no real motivations to build a strong navy, at least until now. Much like the Soviet Union and Europe's NATO partners, though, China definitely had no real reason to build a heavy sea lift capability in order to move thousands of troops and heavy equipment across the ocean. On the other hand, the United States is both blessed and cursed by geography. While it's untouchable to invasion thanks to the Atlantic and the Pacific, it also means that in order to project power on the world stage, America has always needed a strong navy. This is the reason that the U.S. has always had a very strong naval tradition, and why it has invested in naval and air transport more than any other nation on Earth. If U.S. troops want to get somewhere, after all, they're certainly not walking there. To even get forces into the U.S., any invading army is going to need some serious sea lift capability, and no force on Earth comes even close to the U.S.'s 125-vessel Military Sea Lift Command, which operates a vast fleet of oilers, tankers, and heavy cargo transports. Yet, even this fleet is not enough, according to some analysts, and plans are being called for that include dramatically increasing the capability of the U.S.'s military transport fleets. China has in recent years expanded its landing ship capabilities, with several dozen available to carry troops and heavy equipment. These ships, though, are not meant for global operations and are only designed for cross-strait invasions into Taiwan or to ferry supplies to China's illegal holdings in the artificial islands it built across the South China Sea. A crippling lack of support vessels such as oilers means that China cannot physically get its landing ships across the Pacific, though even if this problem were to be solved, the nation cannot hope to make a contested landing on foreign soil.
Not to mention the fact that they're also going through a bit of an economic crisis themselves. They're expected to burst too. Now, the thing about China is this here. They are building a massive blue water navy. However, the question is how many can they build? Now, there's somebody in the comment section going to say they have a lot of slave labor. Well, here's the thing. When you have a military that you're trying to build up like 200 and 300 million, it only has one purpose. It's kind of like an armada purpose. You can't really feed those people beyond it. Remember, it's not just about attacking an area. You've got to be able to hold it too. And if you can't get the means to actually supply them in, especially when it comes to food and actual munitions, that invasion is not going to last very long. So while it may seem tempting to launch a quick strike on somebody, I don't think it's likely because I don't see China or Russia being able to hold. Even if Russia or China got European, Canadian, and support from South America, I don't see it occurring. It would literally take just about every person in the world launching at the United States stuff. Not to mention the fact that you have a massive, largest standing military force in the world already, which, by the way, is the U.S. gun owner. A lot of guys who are veterans, a lot of guys who are former law enforcement, hunters, competition shooters, dudes who like to just shoot just to be shooting. It's not an easy task. It's probably the hardest task in the world I can think of is taking the United States by actual force. Like I said, guys, we'll be doing more scenarios. I'm going to let this video run out and give you some of my final thoughts.
Again, this is because of China's lack of need for a global expeditionary military force. China's chief military concerns lie with a military invasion and forced repatriation of Taiwan, and thus it has not invested money into developing a true blue water navy. Russia has even less naval transport capability and support vessels, which again is a result of its military objectives being close to home. To compound the two nations' sea lift problems, both nations have no dedicated amphibious assault ships capable of providing close air support and air superiority to landing forces on a contested beach. By comparison, the U.S. operates 9 of these specialized vehicles, and they will soon be equipped with the F-35 stealth fighter. Projecting air power is in fact the biggest weakness for any nation hoping to invade the U.S., and China and Russia combined only operate 2 active-duty aircraft carriers of extremely limited capabilities. Russia's infamous Admiral Kuznetsov very publicly had to be towed back to a friendly port after experiencing severe mechanical problems. Without adequate air power, neither nation could expect to secure a foothold on the U.S. mainland. America's air forces are twice as large as both nations combined, and its naval aviation alone is as large as Russia's total air power. If by some miracle either nation could get troops across the ocean to U.S. shores, the lack of air power would reduce the attempted landings to a suicide mission. In the end, not only could the U.S. protect from an invasion of the homeland, but it is currently and for the foreseeable future completely invulnerable to military invasion. Luckily, the U.S., China, and Russia have no desire to fight each other, and there exists no real reason to.
All right, now here's where I'm going to actually end the video. Don't worry about it. I'll be leaving the full video in the description box of this video here. Here's my feeling. As I said before, you would have to get literally everybody in the whole world to actually jump on the United States. It would have to be literally a United States stands alone. And even if that were there was the issue, you've got to get to the largest Air Force in the world. You got to get to the most advanced Navy in the world. You got to get to the most advanced trained personnel, which, by the way, of course, they're weakening our military now with plus what crap. But you're going up against a damn near almost unbeatable force when it comes to its own land. Now, I'm not saying that the United States can't be beaten in wars overseas. Obviously, our leadership has bungled some of those conflicts, but I don't see this situation panning out. So for the most part, I agree with infographics, even though I think that they might have left a few things out. With that right there being said, guys, on Friday, I'm probably going to release another one of these videos. We're going to be starting kind of a series here. I'm going to want to review a few of these Civil War takes, especially in this form here. If you like this content, make sure you guys hit the like button. Make sure you guys subscribe. Make sure you guys share the video. Also, I'll leave a link to my main channel, John Claymore, in the description box, especially if you want the social commentary. Like I said before, guys, make sure you guys hit the like button on this video, subscribe, share. I want to get you guys' thoughts, and I'll see you guys later.